The Death Star was believed to be the most powerful weapon ever constructed by the Empire, and Palpatine put all of his faith in the massive project. Project Stardust started out as an ambitious project to create a battle station that could destroy planets and help the Emperor reign over the galaxy through fear. Massive projects like this take massive amounts of resources though. One of the Empire's best strategic minds was Grand Admiral Thrawn, and he was not a fan of the massive undertaking. Thrawn felt like the amount of materials and funding that the Death Star required made the rest of the Imperial Navy weaker. According to references, the first Death Star alone cost over 1 trillion credits to make, but some sources say that it was closer to 1.5 trillion credits. Either way you look at it, this is a huge amount of funding from an empire which didn't have unlimited credits. Thrawn, on the other hand, felt like this money would be better served going into the Imperial Navy, which was actively managing opposition throughout the galaxy. Thrawn was the only non-human to achieve the rank of Grand Admiral in the Navy, and he took great pride in his station and achievements. With that in mind, he had great ambitions for growing the Navy in its size as well as the ships and weapons that they used. With the same amount of resources used for Project Stardust, Thrawn could construct thousands of Star Destroyers as well as his own TIE Defender project. While the Empire had previously been focusing on quantity over quality, Thrawn's TIE Defender project hoped to change that mindset, as the ship was made to be an elite multi-role starfighter bomber. The TIE Defender was going to be much more durable than the previous TIE models, since this one would be equipped with deflector shields. On top of that, it would also be fitted with a hyperdrive so that it didn't need to be hitched to a carrier ship to cross the galaxy. It came with way more firepower as it had 6 laser cannons, 2 ion cannons, and warhead launchers for torpedoes and missiles. What made it so terrifying and hard for enemies to track was the elite speed that it came with, as it could reach top speeds of 1,680 kilometers an hour. Thrawn felt as though a fleet of high-quality starfighters would be able to crush any rebellion in any region of the galaxy, and the Death Star would only incite martyrdom and more rebellions. A test run of his new ship actually impressed Darth Vader, and Thrawn used his feedback to create an elite prototype of this TIE Defender, and it was even better with its weapons, maneuverability, and speed. The original designs for the ship were drafted by Morgan Elspeth, but they were rejected by the other Imperial officers since the costs were 5 times more expensive than a standard TIE fighter. After Thrawn took on the project, he based the manufacturing on Lothal, where he ran into issues with Ezra Bridger and the rest of his rebel cell. After Governor Price destroyed the fuel depot there and halted production, Thrawn went missing, and the Emperor took all of the remaining funds to finish Project Stardust. The TIE Defender could have proven to be a real problem for the rebels in any space altercations, but Thrawn was the only one who believed in the project. Project Stardust was backed by many more Imperial officers, but Thrawn felt like putting all the funds and personnel behind one single superweapon was foolish, as it could only be in one place at a time. The Death Star would always be one step behind the rebels who continued to hop around, and it would be ineffective in taking out a widespread decentralized enemy such as the Rebel Alliance. Well, the General has been making additions to his collection for several years now, and if you're anything like me, you've probably imagined what it could be like to own a saber yourself. So that's why I started my own store called Stickman Sabers, with a singular goal in mind. Make sabers that look amazing, being inspired by iconic designs but specifically built to actually duel with. No worrying about babying them, just pick them up and go ham. They're equipped with state-of-the-art pixel technology, giving off an incredibly bright light that will light up the darkest rooms out there. And obviously have that iconic hum, just feels right the moment you switch it on. And for a limited time, if you pick a collector's saber up, you'll also get 2 combat sabers for free. So, if you ever thought about starting your own collection, this is a pretty good place to start. Links in the description, and now, let's get back to the video. Better yet, the Death Star created a single point of failure, which Thrawn felt was a massive strategic failure. He knew that if a hidden vulnerability was ever found, the destruction of the Death Star would result in the Empire losing everything. While the rebels had cells everywhere with no single massive unit of power, which let them live to fight another day whether they won or lost, the Empire would essentially be over if the Death Star was destroyed. Secretly, Thrawn was worried that the Empire might use the Death Star against his own people though. This fear is what led to him accepting his promotion to Grand Admiral, as he only took the job after receiving a personal assurance from Palpatine that the Chiss ascendancy would never be a target of his. While Thrawn's objections were strictly from a strategic and financial aspect, Darth Vader had his own reasons for his skepticism. Unlike Thrawn, who submitted formal doubt about the station, Vader expressed his disdain in secret, as he mentioned its shortcomings to Palpatine in private. Unlike the other Imperial officers, Vader and Palpatine shared a bond in the form of the Force, and the fact that they were master and apprentice. In fact, his biggest doubt about the station was quoted on the battle station itself. The ability to destroy a planet is insignificant next to the power of the Force. Vader felt as though Palpatine was relying too much on a technological terror when he should have been focusing on his connection to the dark side, which is what truly brought himself into a position of power. While Vader and Palpatine were far from traditional Sith, Vader felt like the Death Star was a crude substitute for the spiritual dominance that the Sith would have been able to wield. Vader knew that those who took pride in weapons such as the Death Star would end up courting disaster as overconfidence led to mistakes. While the station was touted as an invincible entity in the galaxy, Vader knew that this would lead to a certain hubris that was the downfall of many before Palpatine. Vader was an extremely experienced pilot, and was known to be one of the greatest pilots in the galaxy when he was known as Anakin Skywalker. This is why he was so impressed with Thrawn's TIE Defender model, but he also understood that all of the largest machines in the galaxy came with vulnerabilities. While the Death Star was clearly able to hold its own against a fleet or other carrier ships, Vader had his own doubts about its ability to defend against small-scale starfighter strikes. This doubt proved to be justifiable, since this is exactly how it was destroyed. While Vader wasn't keen on relying on gigantic technological terrors, he did understand the effectiveness of military investments. Before becoming Darth Vader, Anakin Skywalker was a great Jedi General during the Clone Wars, and he had extensive experience with the military and how far a good army would carry you. This is why he supported Thrawn's project, as it would make the Imperial fleet much more effective and versatile in the way that it could defend the Empire's interests. Deep down, Vader always looked out for himself over anything else, and this is why he felt like the Death Star was a threat to his own existence as Palpatine's apprentice. While Vader was able to drive terror into the hearts of anyone who faced him, he felt like the Emperor would no longer need him if he had a weapon that could destroy planets with the push of a button. Vader was even so suspicious of the project that he conducted his own investigation on the secrecy of the project, as well as the Kyber crystal research going on behind the scenes. After researching on his own, he warned Tarkin and Palpatine about their reliance on such a technological terror rather than putting their faith in the Force. In the end, Palpatine decided to ignore all of the warnings from Thrawn and Vader, and he continued with the project to go along with the Tarkin Doctrine, which focused on ruling through fear. Since his strategic and personal goals were rooted in absolute control and spiritual dominance, he felt like this was the only true way for him to achieve these goals. While the ability to destroy planets was crucial to the battle station, Palpatine really felt like all he needed was the sheer presence of the battle station to drive fear into the hearts of his enemies. Once the power of the battle station was showcased, Palpatine felt as though the mere existence of the Death Star would terrify star systems into submission, which would lead to the end of the Senate and military patrolling throughout the galaxy. Palpatine felt as though authority could be ignored by rebel factions, and that was what he had been truly fighting since the end of the Clone Wars. On the other hand, no one could ignore absolute power that would allow him to bypass the political processes that weighed him down in the Senate. While Thrawn and Vader saw a singular technological terror as a huge vulnerability for the Empire, Palpatine saw it as concentrated power that would prevent ambitious admirals from challenging him. Vader believed that Palpatine had lost his focus in the dark side by relying on the station, but Palpatine felt as though it connected him to the Force even more. The overconfidence that Vader warned about led Palpatine to believe in his own foresight too much, which meant he dismissed any vulnerabilities as insignificant. The one thing that Vader and Thrawn didn't consider is the fact that the Death Star was also meant to be a distraction for his military over a final war effort. This was his way of keeping his power-hungry officers occupied with busy work while he continued searching for the keys to immortality. Another rumor was that Palpatine actually created the Death Star as a means to unify and arm the galaxy against the predicted extragalactic invasion by the Yuuzhan Vong, and this was a threat that he didn't forewarn his officials about. After the first Death Star was destroyed by Luke Skywalker, Palpatine was furious, and he punished many of his own subordinates. First of all, he saw the destruction of the battle station as a huge failure on Vader's part, and he demoted Vader and placed him under the command of General Cassio Tag. While rank wasn't that big of a deal for Vader, being put under the command of an inferior being was meant to humiliate the Sith Lord. It was after the Battle of Yavin that Palpatine actually started looking for a replacement for Vader, and he commissioned cyberneticist Silo to create enhanced warriors that would fight for their place as his right-hand enforcer. As for the rest of the ranks, multiple officers such as Moff Kuvern and Minister Kempt were executed for their failures. While the minds behind Project Stardust, Galen Erso and Director Krennic, were already dead, Palpatine decided to punish the architect known as Bevel Lemelisk, but he did so multiple times. He used Sith-influenced cloning tech to resurrect him after each execution so that he could do it in even more painful ways. On top of that, he decided to shift his strategy from ruling with fear to focusing on military aggression. He'd already dissolved the Senate after the Death Star was created, and this meant that he had to consolidate power quickly through regional Moffs. He also focused on searching for a Force-sensitive pilot who destroyed the Death Star, Luke Skywalker. He believed that the young Jedi would be a much more valuable asset than any tech that he could construct. This didn't stop him from accelerating plans on a second Death Star, though. This time around, he wanted to make sure that the single point of failure was addressed in the designs, and he made sure that the architects looked over the plans multiple times. While it might seem like he just didn't learn his lesson the first time, this decision was actually to be used as bait for the Rebel Alliance. Palpatine wanted to make it seem as though the battle station was non-operational so he could draw in the majority of the Rebel fleet, but he also mentioned that he would be overseeing the final stages of construction personally. This was too big of a target for the Rebels to ignore, and they took the bait without question. This time around, Palpatine made sure that there was no 2-meter-wide exhaust port like there was on the original station, and it used millions of millimeter-sized heat dispersion tubes so the Rebels couldn't hit it with a torpedo strike again. The super laser didn't take as long to recharge between shots, and this meant that it could take out multiple capital ships while only waiting a few minutes to fire. By leaking the information of the shield generators on Endor, he was able to take out the ground forces as well as the fleet with one operation. But while this was all a trap, his hubris was still clearly clouding his judgment. Just like Vader warned him, he was too overconfident about his trap and the second Death Star. And just like Thrawn warned him, having all of the Empire's assets and Supreme Leader on one station ended up destroying the Empire with one fell swoop. While the first Death Star took a total of 20 years to make, this one only took around 4 years, and this is because most of the research and development hurdles had already been figured out the first time around. This added to Palpatine's overconfidence in the weapon, but without the Senate getting involved, he had free reign to work on this one openly. In the end, it was clear that Palpatine's Sith hubris was what really stood in the way of progress, and listening to reason from his most trusted advisors. But this has backfired on him many times before. His hubris got the best of him when Mace Windu and other Jedi came to arrest him, and he believed that he was strong enough to defeat any Jedi who opposed him. In the end, Mace Windu bested him, and he was lucky enough that Anakin arrived to intervene. His hubris also backfired when looking at the ground operation on Endor. While he believed that his troops and mechanical weapons such as the AT-STs would be more than enough to squash the rebels and local life forms, he underestimated the primitive Ewoks and their alliance with the rebels. Better yet, his overconfidence in his control of Vader really led to his ultimate destruction. It was no secret that Vader hated and despised his master, but Vader had yet to be tested on an emotional level. With Luke being present on the second Death Star, Palpatine put himself in a peculiar predicament. On one hand, he could try to recruit Luke, but then he'd have to take out Vader one way or another. Or Luke would refuse to join him, and he'd have to test Vader's level of emotional connection with his son. Either way, Palpatine truly believed that this control of the situation was more than enough to never fear anything. He was sorely mistaken. While Palpatine ignored warnings from Vader and Thrawn, it turns out that he actually commended someone for warning about the original battle station. General Cassio Tag warned Palpatine about the original Death Star's vulnerabilities, and after it was destroyed, Palpatine acknowledged his insightful judgment, and he rewarded him. Tag was promoted to Grand General, which was a position specifically created for him, and he was named the de facto Supreme Commander. While Tag was given all of these accommodations, he never actually survived long enough to see the construction of the second Death Star. He survived the destruction of the first one, as he was off station investigating Princess Leia's claim that the rebel base was actually on Dantooine. His favor was short-lived though, as he was demoted and executed by Vader when he failed to prevent a coup attempt by the scientist Dr. Silo. This is the same doctor that Palpatine would later ask to create cybernetic beings to replace Darth Vader. If Palpatine had listened to warnings from Vader and Thrawn, the entire focus of the war would have shifted from that of fear and superweapons to a much more effective military mindset that could have potentially crushed the rebellion. If the TIE Defender program had gotten the funding over Project Stardust, the Empire would have had an effective ship that could have neutralized X-Wings and Y-Wings, which were the rebellion's most effective ships. The Death Star's destruction of Alderaan was a driving force that sent thousands of systems to support the rebels, and without that action taking place, the Rebel Alliance would have more than likely dwindled away over the course of each confrontation. The Empire wouldn't have had to worry about having a single point of failure either, which meant that losing a battle didn't mean the end of the war. There would have always been resources and people spread throughout the galaxy to enforce the Emperor's will. As for the Sith side of things, Vader more than likely would have respected the Emperor more for listening to him and sticking to more traditional means of enforcing the Sith might. Without having to manage the Death Star, there's no reason for Leia to call for Obi-Wan, which meant there would have been no reason for Luke to get pulled into the conflict. In the end, Palpatine listening to the advice of his advisors could have potentially won the war for him.
Oh, and again, for a limited time, every Stickman saber purchase comes with 2 additional combat sabers, so you're more than ready for your own duels. If that sounds like something you'd want to look into, the link's in the description.